Jasmine Carter had spent 10 years building her reputation as Miami's most ruthless defense attorney, winning cases everyone said were unwinnable. But on June 14, 2024, exactly 10 days after her fairy tale wedding to the man she'd loved since law school, she would need those same skills to defend herself against 2 counts of first-degree murder, because the evidence against her was stronger than anything she'd ever faced in court. If you're fascinated by how betrayal can turn a brilliant legal mind into a calculated killer, and how the justice system handles one of its own, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because this story will show you that sometimes the prosecutor becomes the defendant. But let's go back to where it all began. Jasmine Marie Carter grew up in Liberty City, the part of Miami that tourists never see. Her mother, Denise Carter, worked double shifts as an ER nurse at Jackson Memorial Hospital. Her father had left before Jasmine's 3rd birthday, and his absence became the driving force behind everything she would become. "You don't need a man to be somebody," Denise told her daughter every morning before school. "You need education, determination, and the refusal to accept what the world says you deserve." Jasmine took those words and built a fortress around them. Valedictorian at Miami Northwestern Senior High. Full scholarship to University of Miami. Top 5% at Law School. She didn't just succeed, she dominated. Every professor, every classmate, every opponent learned the same lesson. Jasmine Carter didn't lose. That's where she met Marcus Reynolds in their first-year contracts class. He was everything she told herself she didn't need. Charming, athletic, from old money that whispered rather than shouted. His family owned Reynolds Sports Management, representing half the NFL's star players. While Jasmine was fighting for scholarships, Marcus was driving a BMW his parents bought him for getting into law school. They should have been enemies. Instead, they became inevitable. Their courtship was a 6-year dance of competition and chemistry. They studied together, argued about case law, pushed each other to be better. When Jasmine landed her dream job at Miami's premier criminal defense firm, Marcus was the first person she called. When he decided to leave law to join the family business, she was the one who convinced him it wasn't giving up, it was evolution. The proposal came on South Beach at sunrise. Marcus on one knee with a ring that cost more than Jasmine's first car. "I don't need you," she told him, tears streaming down her face. "But I choose you. Every day, I choose you." The wedding on June 4th, 2024 was everything Denise Carter had sacrificed for. 200 guests at the Perez Art Museum, overlooking Biscayne Bay. Jasmine wore a custom Nina Tornai gown that made her look like royalty. The reception featured a performance by a Grammy-winning artist Marcus had represented. It was perfection, documented on Instagram, shared on TikTok, featured in Miami Social Magazine. But perfection, as Jasmine would soon learn, is just another word for blindness. The cracks appeared on day 3 of their Turks and Caicos honeymoon. Marcus was glued to his phone, claiming a major client crisis. Jasmine, trained to spot lies in courtroom testimony, recognized the tells: the angled screen, the delayed responses, the bathroom calls that lasted too long. "Is everything okay?" she asked on her 4th night, watching him type furiously during dinner. "Just work," he said, not meeting her eyes. "You know how it is." She didn't know. She knew the difference between work stress and guilt. She knew the micro-expressions that signaled deception. She knew, but she chose to believe the lie because the truth was too devastating to accept. They returned to Miami on June 10th, moving into the Brickell penthouse Marcus had purchased as a wedding gift. Floor-to-ceiling windows, chef's kitchen, a view that stretched from South Beach to Key Biscayne. Jasmine should have been happy. Instead, she felt like she was living in a beautiful cage. The discovery came on June 12th, in the most cliched way possible. Marcus was in the shower. His phone lit up with a message preview that shattered Jasmine's world. "Can't wait for Friday. Same place, same time. I missed you so much." The sender, Simone Parker. Jasmine's hands went numb. Simone wasn't just anyone. She was Jasmine's former colleague at the law firm, the woman Jasmine had mentored, defended when partners wanted to fire her, invited to her wedding. Simone had sat in the 3rd row, crying during the vows, hugging Jasmine afterward and whispering, "You deserve all the happiness in the world." Jasmine accessed Marcus's laptop. They shared passwords, a sign of trust that now felt like weaponized naivety. The email trail went back 8 months. Hotel reservations, intimate photos, plans made while Jasmine was in trial, fighting for clients while her husband was building a life with her protégé. The most devastating message was dated May 29th, 6 days before their wedding. I know this is complicated, but after the wedding, we need to figure this out. I can't keep pretending when I'm with you that I don't wish it was you walking down that aisle. Marcus's response, soon, I promise. Just let me get through this wedding, and we'll figure out our future. Jasmine read those words 3 times before her legal mind kicked into gear. Evidence. She needed evidence that would hold up not in court, but in her own need for certainty. She copied everything to an encrypted cloud drive, screenshot text messages, documented the timeline with the precision of a prosecutor building a murder case, which in 48 hours is exactly what it would become. Friday, June 14th. The meeting was scheduled for 8 p.m. at the Mandarin Oriental, room 1547. Jasmine knew because she'd been tracking Marcus's location since discovering the affair. She knew because her legal training had taught her that revenge without evidence is just violence. But revenge with documentation is justice. Marcus told her he had a late dinner with a potential client from the Lakers. He kissed her forehead, adjusted his Rolex, and left their penthouse smelling of Tom Ford cologne, the expensive one he only wore for special occasions. Jasmine waited 30 minutes, then made her move. She'd spent the previous 48 hours in a dissociative state that would later become the cornerstone of her defense. Her legal mind was simultaneously planning and documenting her own descent into something she didn't recognize. She knew hotel security protocols. She knew how to avoid cameras. She knew that the Mandarin Oriental had a service elevator that required a staff keycard, easily obtained by bribing a housekeeper with $500 cash and a story about surprising her cheating husband. The psychology of betrayal is complex. Jasmine wasn't some scorned woman acting on impulse. She was a criminal defense attorney who'd spent a decade studying violent crimes, understanding perpetrator psychology, learning exactly how murders get solved and how they don't. At 7:47 p.m., Jasmine arrived at the hotel wearing a black wig, oversized sunglasses, and clothing from a thrift store she'd never been to before. All purchased with cash, all disposable. She'd left her phone at home, playing music in their bedroom to establish an alibi. She'd even pre-ordered delivery food timed to arrive at 8:15 p.m., ensuring the doorman would document her presence at their building. But here's what Jasmine didn't know. The hotel had recently upgraded its AI-powered security system. The same facial recognition technology she'd read about in legal journals was now tracking her every move, wig and sunglasses be damned. Room 1547 was at the end of the hallway, the kind of corner suite that cost $800 a night and featured a balcony overlooking Biscayne Bay. Through the door, Jasmine could hear music, John Legend, the same song that played during their first dance 10 days ago. The irony was too perfect, too cruel. She used the service keycard she'd obtained to enter silently. The suite's living area was empty, but she could hear voices from the bedroom. Marcus's deep laugh and Simone's higher pitch, both intimate and familiar. What happened next would be disputed in court for months. The prosecution would claim premeditated murder. The defense would argue temporary insanity triggered by extreme psychological trauma. The truth, as always, was more complicated. Jasmine found them in bed, wrapped in Egyptian cotton sheets that probably cost more than her mother's monthly rent. Marcus saw her first, his expression shifting from pleasure to confusion to horror in the span of 3 seconds. Jasmine, he started, but she cut him off. Don't. Her voice was eerily calm, the same tone she used in court when she knew she'd already won. I'm not here for explanations. I'm here because I need you both to understand something. Simone grabbed the sheet, covering herself, her eyes wide with terror and something that looked almost like relief, like she'd been waiting for this confrontation, wanting it to end the charade. What Jasmine had planned as a confrontation escalated with terrifying speed. The physical altercation that followed, later documented in forensic reports, showed evidence of a struggle. But the sequence of events would be impossible to definitively prove. The medical examiner would later testify that Marcus died from blunt force trauma consistent with his head striking the marble edge of the nightstand during a violent push. Simone's death was more ambiguous, strangulation, but the forensic evidence couldn't determine if it was intentional or the result of a panic struggle. By 8:34 p.m., two people were dead in room 1547, and Jasmine Carter, Miami's most brilliant defense attorney, was standing over them, realizing that all her legal knowledge couldn't undo what she'd just done. She didn't run. That's what would fascinate investigators later. She sat on the suite's couch, called 911, and waited. When police arrived 11 minutes later, she was composed, her hands visible, making no attempts to flee. "I'm Jasmine Carter," she told the first officer calmly. "I'm an attorney, and I'm invoking my Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. I will cooperate fully, but I'm requesting legal representation immediately." Even in her moment of complete destruction, Jasmine Carter was still thinking like a lawyer. It's what would make her case so fascinating and so impossible to defend. Detective Maria Gonzalez had worked Miami homicide for 16 years, but this case was different. The suspect was a lawyer who knew exactly how investigations worked. The crime scene was both too clean and too messy, suggesting either extreme planning or complete psychological breakdown. The hotel's AI security system provided the smoking gun. Facial recognition tracked Jasmine entering through the service entrance despite her disguise. Her biometric data, gait analysis, body measurements, even her unique movement patterns, matched with 97.3% certainty. She tried to outsmart technology she didn't fully understand, Gonzalez told her partner. Classic lawyer mistake. They think knowing the law means knowing everything. The evidence was devastating. The encrypted cloud drive Jasmine created to document Marcus's affair became evidence of premeditation. The cash purchases, the disguise, the disabled phone, all pointed to planning. But the physical evidence told a different story. Defensive wounds on Jasmine's arms, Marcus's DNA under her fingernails, signs of a chaotic struggle rather than calculated execution. The prosecution was led by State Attorney Richard Hayes, who'd lost 3 cases to Jasmine in the past 2 years. His press conference was pointed. No one is above the law. Not wealth, not education, not legal expertise. 2 people are dead, and justice will be served. But finding a defense attorney willing to take on Jasmine's case proved nearly impossible. She knew too much, had worked with too many, and her reputation for destroying opposing counsel made her toxic. Finally, Gerald Morrison, a 68-year-old legend who'd been Jasmine's mentor, agreed to represent her. "You taught me to fight for the truth," he told her during their first jail meeting. "Now I'll fight for yours." The media frenzy was immediate and brutal. Miami's deadly attorney became the headline. Social media split between those who saw her as a victim of betrayal pushed too far and those who viewed her as a calculated killer who used her legal knowledge to commit murder. Jasmine's mother, Denise, gave one interview that went viral. "My daughter spent her whole life fighting for justice. Now she needs someone to fight for her. Whatever happened in that room, I know my baby's heart. She's not a killer." The bail hearing was standing room only. Hayes argued Jasmine was a flight risk with resources and international connections. Morrison countered that she called 911 herself and waited for police, not the actions of someone planning to flee. Judge Patricia Wilson set bail at $2 million, which Jasmine's family somehow scraped together by mortgaging everything they owned. Released on ankle monitor, Jasmine returned to the penthouse that now felt like a mausoleum of broken promises. The psychological evaluation became crucial. Dr. Angela Brooks spent 40 hours with Jasmine, uncovering a pattern of childhood abandonment trauma, perfectionism as defense mechanism, and an identity built entirely on control and competence. When she discovered the affair, Dr. Brooks would later testify, it wasn't just betrayal. It was complete ego death. Everything she'd built her identity on, her judgment, her ability to read people, her choice of partner, was revealed as false. For someone whose entire self-worth is tied to being right, being the smartest person in the room, this level of wrongness about the most important decision of her life triggered a complete psychological break. The trial would hinge on one question. Did Jasmine Carter plan to kill her husband and his mistress, or did a brilliant legal mind shatter so completely under betrayal that she became someone unrecognizable? The answer would determine if she spent 10 years in prison or the rest of her life. The trial began September 18, 2024, in Miami-Dade Circuit Court. Every major network carried it live. The woman who'd made her career defending the accused now sat at the defense table, facing 2 counts of first-degree murder. Prosecutor Hayes' opening was surgical. Ladies and gentlemen, the defendant is a criminal defense attorney. She knows how murders are investigated. She knows what evidence looks like. She used that knowledge to plan, execute, and attempt to cover up a double homicide. The disguise, the cash payments, the disabled phone. This wasn't passion. This was premeditation. The forensic evidence was damning. The AI facial recognition, the timeline, the documented affair, discovery 48 hours before the murders. Hayes even presented Jasmine's own case files, showing she'd defended clients accused of crimes of passion by arguing premeditation. She knew exactly what arguments would be used against her, he said, and she did it anyway. Marcus's mother took the stand, devastating in her grief. My son made a mistake. But marriage counseling exists. Divorce exists. Murder is not a solution to a broken heart. But Morrison's defense was equally powerful. He didn't deny what Jasmine did. He explained why. This is a woman who spent 28 years building an identity based on control, intelligence, and never being wrong. When she discovered her judgment about the most important person in her life was completely false, when she learned that her protégé and her husband had been betraying her for months, something broke that couldn't be fixed. Dr. Brooks's testimony was the turning point. She described acute dissociative disorder triggered by catastrophic identity collapse. The planning Jasmine did, the disguise, the cash, weren't signs of premeditation for murder, but rather a dissociative state where she was operating on autopilot. Her legal training functioning while her conscious mind had shattered. She wasn't planning murder, Dr. Brooks explained. She was planning confrontation using the only framework her broken mind could access, her professional training. When that confrontation escalated, she wasn't Jasmine Carter, the defense attorney, anymore. She was a traumatized woman experiencing complete psychological collapse. The defense called Jasmine's former clients, people she'd saved from life sentences, who testified to her character, her empathy, her dedication to justice. They painted a picture of someone incapable of cold-blooded murder. Then Jasmine testified. Against Morrison's advice, she took the stand for 6 hours over 2 days. Her testimony was raw, honest, and devastatingly self-aware. I know what the evidence looks like, she told the jury. I've prosecuted this case 100 times in my mind. But evidence doesn't show what it feels like when your entire reality shatters. When the person you chose, the person you trusted with your whole heart, reveals that your marriage was built on lies from the beginning. She described finding them together. I wasn't thinking about murder. I was thinking about all the moments I'd missed, the late nights he claimed were work, the phone calls he took in another room, the time Simone asked about our relationship while sleeping with my husband. I wanted them to feel what I felt, to understand what they destroyed. Hayes' cross-examination was brutal. You expect this jury to believe that a brilliant attorney who documented everything, who disguised herself, who knew exactly how to avoid security. You expect us to believe you weren't planning murder? Jasmine's answer would define the case. I was planning to confront them. What happened after? I don't recognize that person. That wasn't me. That was someone whose entire world had just ended. The jury deliberated for 5 days, a lifetime for everyone involved. When they returned, the verdict was split. Guilty of voluntary manslaughter for Marcus. Guilty of second-degree murder for Simone. The jury had found middle ground. They acknowledged the extreme emotional disturbance while recognizing that Jasmine's actions, particularly with Simone, crossed from tragic breakdown into criminal culpability. Sentencing came 30 days later. Simone's family gave victim impact statements that left the courtroom in tears. Marcus's mother simply said, "I hope you live long enough to understand what you took from us." Judge Wilson sentenced Jasmine to 15 years for Simone's death, 8 years for Marcus's, to run consecutively. With good behavior, she'd be eligible for parole in 18 years. At 28, Jasmine would be 46 when she tasted freedom again. "You were brilliant," Judge Wilson said during sentencing. "You had everything, and you threw it all away because you couldn't handle being wrong about the man you loved. That's not justice. That's tragedy." Lowell Correctional Institution, Florida. Jasmine Carter, inmate number 847392, spent her first year in prison in complete silence. Other inmates whispered about the famous lawyer who'd killed her husband. Some saw her as a hero who'd taken revenge on a cheating man. Others saw her as everything wrong with entitled professionals who think they're above consequences. Denise Carter visited every month, the 4-hour drive from Miami becoming a ritual of maternal devotion. "You're still my daughter," she'd say through the plexiglass barrier. "You made a terrible choice, but you're still mine." The appeal Morrison filed was denied. The evidence was too strong, the jury instructions proper, the sentence within guidelines. Jasmine would serve her time with no shortcuts, no legal loopholes she'd spent her career exploiting for others. But prison changed her in unexpected ways. She began teaching GED classes, helping women who'd never had her advantages learn to read, to write, to believe they deserved more than the lives that led them here. She started a legal aid program, using her knowledge to help fellow inmates file appeals, fight wrongful convictions, navigate systems designed to keep them powerless. "It's the first time in my life I've helped people without needing to win," she told a prison counselor during a mandatory evaluation. "I spent 28 years trying to be perfect. Now I'm just trying to be useful." 3 years into her sentence, Jasmine received an unexpected letter from Simone Parker's younger sister, Michelle. The letter began, "I hated you for killing my sister. I still hate what you did. But I need you to know something she never told anyone." Michelle's letter revealed that Simone had been in an abusive relationship before moving to Miami. Marcus had pursued her relentlessly, promising to protect her, to give her the life she deserved. "She wasn't a homewrecker," Michelle wrote. "She was a broken woman who believed his lies just like you did. You both loved the same man who wasn't capable of loving anyone but himself." The revelation didn't excuse what Jasmine did, but complicated the narrative. Simone wasn't the villain Jasmine had constructed in her mind. She was another victim of Marcus's manipulations, another woman whose trust he'd weaponized. Jasmine wrote back, "Thank you for telling me. It doesn't change what I did, but it helps me understand who I killed. Your sister deserved better than Marcus. She deserved better than me. I'm sorry I took away her chance to find it." The correspondence continued for years, evolving from anger to understanding to something resembling forgiveness. Not of the act, but of the brokenness that led to it. The Reynolds family never forgave Jasmine. Marcus's mother started a foundation for domestic violence prevention, speaking at colleges about how emotional abuse can flow both ways. "My son was a cheater," she'd say, "but he didn't deserve to die. No one deserves to die because someone's feelings got hurt." The case sparked nationwide debates about the legal system's treatment of crimes of passion, about whether emotional trauma should mitigate murder charges, about the dangerous intersection of intelligence and instability. Law school studied Jasmine's case as an example of how legal knowledge can be both weapon and shield. Psychology programs analyzed her breakdown as a textbook case of identity-based trauma. True crime podcasts dissected every detail, with commenters split between sympathy and condemnation. After 8 years, Jasmine's first parole hearing arrived. She sat before the board, no longer the polished attorney who'd once dominated courtrooms, but a woman who'd spent nearly a decade confronting what she'd done. "I don't deserve parole," she told the board. "I took 2 lives because I couldn't handle my own pain. But I've spent 8 years trying to become someone who could live with that. Someone who could use what I know to help others instead of destroying them." The board denied parole. She'd serve at least 5 more years. Jasmine didn't appeal. She returned to her cell, to her students, to the legal aid work that had become her redemption. She'd spend her youth building a career. She'd spend her middle age atoning for destroying it. Her mother visited the next month. "I'm proud of you," Denise said, and Jasmine cried for the first time since sentencing. "I destroyed everything you sacrificed for. No, baby, you survived something that destroyed you. Now you're building something new from what's left. That's what I taught you, how to build from nothing." Jasmine Carter will be eligible for parole again in 2032. She'll be 36 years old, having spent over a decade behind bars for 15 minutes that destroyed 3 lives. Whether she deserves freedom is a question the legal system will answer. Whether she's earned forgiveness is something only the dead can decide. But in the meantime, she teaches. She learns. She helps women who remind her of who she once was: brilliant, driven, convinced that intelligence can protect you from making terrible choices. "I was the smartest person I knew," she tells her students, "and I made the stupidest decision possible." Don't let anyone tell you that education makes you immune to destruction. It just means you have no excuse when you choose it anyway. The case of Jasmine Carter remains one of Miami's most controversial. The brilliant attorney who knew better. The betrayed wife who chose murder over divorce. The woman who had everything and lost it all because she couldn't handle being wrong. There are no winners in this story. Only survivors trying to make sense of a tragedy that should never have happened. Marcus Reynolds is dead. Simone Parker is dead. Jasmine Carter is alive, but the woman she was died in that hotel room alongside her victims. What remains is someone trying to answer an impossible question. How do you atone for the unforgivable? How do you build a life worth living after destroying others? Jasmine doesn't have the answer yet, but she has 13 more years to figure it out.